Kevin, 42% said they weren't quite sure what to do about the situation. What would you do about it?
Good morning. Yes, the country's clearly divided still about who's responsible for the situation we're in and who's best able to get us out of it. I just smiled slightly there when you were reading some of the figures out. I mean, if you remember back to the kind of the dog days of the last Labour government, George Osborne was very fond of saying that Labour hadn't fixed the roof while the sun was shining, and that arguments that the financial crash of 2008, 2009 were a global phenomenon weren't true, and it was down to bad economic management at home. And in a sense, what we've got now is the exact reverse, surprisingly, of that argument, with Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak very keen to make the argument that this is a global phenomenon, that there's inflationary pressure due to Russia and lots of other pressures in the global economy, and that it's not down to their economic management, having obviously been in power for 12 years continuously. So swings and roundabouts. I suspect where we are with public opinion is that the Conservatives are very aware that they've lost a lot of public trust, particularly about their management of the economy, given the kind of interregnum with Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, which obviously did so much damage to the public finances in such a short period of time. But they're not out of the game yet. I think that's one of the takeaway points of this morning from your poll. Labour still has a lot of work to do to catch up and to build trust that they're a credible custodian of the public finances and the economy. And that won't be lost on Keir Starmer and his team as they plan very carefully how Labour approaches this next period. For example, Keir Starmer's taken a bit of stick from people on the left for accepting the figures from the Office of Budget Responsibility, the framing of the financial statement the other day, that cuts are needed and tax rises are needed to balance the public finances. Now some left-wing economists are saying that's not true, these figures are wrong, therefore the framing of the response is wrong. But Keir Starmer's not really going down that road. He's accepting the OBR figures at face value and will base Labour's economic policy very much on the basis of those figures. So he wants to engage with reality and frame an offer as we go into this last period of this Parliament, the last couple of years, where the debate really intensifies and people make their choices. For the government, the big problem is that the economic cycle and the political cycle are now in two different places. Basically, Jeremy Hunt is running out of time, and he may be remembered as the man who sorted the public finances out, a bit like Roy Jenkins, Harold Wilson's Chancellor in the late 1960s. Loads of plaudits from economists and newspaper editors for balancing the budget, but lost an election in 1970. And this could be the scenario that the Tories are now looking at.
Kev, let's look at some of the detail of what came out, though. £20,000 worse off for the middle classes, higher taxes for the high earners, an increase in benefits, an increase in NHS spending, an increase in education, and windfall taxes on the oil companies. Why do we need a Labour government when we've already got one?
That's a good question. I mean, I suspect Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng are grinding their teeth to dust at this point. This is a complete disavowal of their brief tenure. I mean, they're trying to trade off some very, very difficult competing choices. How do you keep the blue wall, this kind of southern Conservative seats that they would regard as a safe bet, when the Liberal Democrats are now creeping up in the polls quite considerably and are going to cause them some problems at the next election? But also, how do you hold on to the fabled red wall, the kind of marginal seats in the north and the east and west Midlands, which the Tories won under Boris Johnson as a kind of post-Brexit bounce? If you're going to douse a lot of these people with tax rises and more regulation and public spending cuts, then they're going to ask the question, why bother with you guys again? And that's a response that's applicable both to the red wall and to the blue wall. So that's the kind of danger point for the Tories. But this is what I mean, where the political cycle, the ability to make difficult choices in government, but then have enough time to recover for the rest of the Parliament, they don't have that time. They are running out of road rapidly. And I suspect what we'll see next is a lot of Conservative MPs starting to really kick off about some of the measures in this budget. And then it's a question of whether Jeremy Hunt and the Treasury and Rishi Sunak can hold the line.